Jake, welcome to Silk Cycles, and today I'm going to run you through, put together a set of the new HEL Advocate brakes. We'll run through what tools we're going to need. We're going to need some decent cable cutters, a 2.5mm Allen key, a 3mm Allen key, a 4mm Allen key, and a 5mm Allen key, a pick, a couple of 8mm spanners. So let's get these things unboxed. So we've got, in the pack, you'll get a nice long reel of hose, all the attachments in there. So you've got your shroud, you've got your male master cylinder fitting, and then we've got the banjo fitting for the caliper. We've got both our levers, or master cylinders, and then both our calipers. The first thing we are going to do is fit our attachments onto the caliper, and then we're going to size it up onto the bike. All of these brakes will be coming with a braided hose. It's 5mm, which will make it nice and easy for routing through your internally routed frames. The bike we're going to put it onto today is externally routed, just to make it a little bit easier. But as we say, this is some decent hose we've got here, so it's not going to have any trouble getting through. So in the pack is 2.7 meters worth of hose. We're not going to cut any of this until we're sizing it up on the bike. There's plenty enough here to do your whole bike, as long as you don't go cutting too early. As the saying goes, cut thrice, measure once, measure twice.
Measure twice,
cut once. Okay, so inside of here, you can see a little bit of braiding. So what we're going to want to do is just even this up slightly with our cable cutters. This is a little bit more round. And then with the pick, we're just going to push it in slightly to move the PTFE out of the way slightly. And then we've got our collection of bits in the packet. So we've got our 2 over bits for the caliper end, and for the master cylinder end, we've got our banjo ends there, and a couple of O-rings to accompany either side of the banjo. And there's one spare. And these guys are for the master cylinder. So we are going to put together a caliper end, starting with sliding this guy down over the hose. Just use the bit that we didn't sort. And then with a firm push, this, which is essentially the olive and shroud going in there, we're just going to push in with a little bit of firmness and then twist. This bit is threaded, so with a bit of pressure, we can just thread that all the way through. You should feel it biting as it kind of gets 2/3 of the way down the thread of the shroud. And then we've got this conical bit here. Now there is a reference line, but we're probably going to want to go up and past that. So if we imagine we split this cone in half, we're going to thread it through until it gets about halfway up there. You can see it kind of splaying around it. I reckon that looks good. So inside of this sleeve, we've got an internal locking collar. Now what that's going to do is eliminate the need for any copper washers or anything like that. It's just going to simply seal around the hose and create this lovely 2-piece fit. Cool, so we've got the outer collar finger tight on there. Now what we're going to do, just to avoid any kind of damage within the banjo, we're actually going to attach it to the caliper now, and then we're going to knit this guy up until it doesn't move. There's no torque on this necessarily, but you just want to tighten it until you feel that there's a nice bit of resistance there. So we've got both our O-rings here, which are going to fit on either side of the banjo. And then we've got our little bolt, just going to go through. And then we've got the thread on the inside of the caliper, which we're just going to screw into. Being conscious of the O-ring sitting in that banjo quite happily. Just make sure nothing's getting nicked. That all looks pretty happy to me. Yeah, that's sat nice and flush there. So I've got this in here hand tight, and we're just going to do a quarter turn. About an eighth to a quarter. And that's on there nice and tight. So not forgetting to just nip this guy up. The hose will move a bit, but this is nice and easy because we're off the bike. Let's keep him down here. Now this is naturally just going to twist with us because we're making everything move, and it's just showing that you've got a nice solid lock on there. So what's happened there is I've felt a little bit of resistance, and then I've kind of nipped up until I'm happy that it's not going to move anymore. We don't need to then be cranking past that tightening point. That's on there, nice and sealed, all good to go. Okay, so in the box, we will have 2 sets of pads, 4 bolts, which will fit directly to a post mount bike, and then this very lovely bleed block. We're going to need, just for the meantime, these 4 bolts. I'm going to move over to the bike and start fitting the brake on. So, nice and simply, we've got our 2 caliper bolts here. We're just going to drop them on the floor. Pick them up and just bolt that caliper down so we've got it in its home, ready for the rest of the procedure. I have already set up my cable ties. I'm just going to thread it inside the frame and have it coming out through. Now, if you're internally routing, this is going to be a real case of making sure you get the size right. And you're going to be able to cut it once it's routed through. Get all these tightened up so that the cable's sat in its right place. Cool, and we've got loads of hose left over, which is good. So now we're going to want the master cylinder and our 4mm Allen key. The good thing about these brakes is everything just feels nice and burly. Just screw in the first couple of threads. Now this lever clamp needs to be completely done up on the top one. So you're going to tighten in that top bolt straight down, and I'm just going to nip up this one for the meantime. Might be a little bit too far away for my tiny hands. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Cool, so we've got a bit of a reference point for where we're going to cut our hose to, and then it's just a nice simple case of sizing it up, lining it up. I want it to look fairly neat. So bear in mind we've got the fittings that are going to go on there too. They're going to extend it a little bit. Just making sure that we get full rotation of our bars. Not going to rip anything out. I would say as a rule of thumb, probably cut 1 centimetre longer than you're actually going to need it for, just to avoid any disappointment when it comes to it. Like I said, we get 2.7 metres of hose here, which is plenty enough. Most brakes on the market are coming with 1700mm for the rear and 1000 for the front, so I think we've got enough here. And to cut with, we're just going to use a really decent set of cable cutters. Because it's a braided hose, you want a nice clean cut through. Side cutters will probably suffice, but just make sure they are nice and fresh. But yeah, a decent cable cutter is going to be what gives you the cleanest cut on this. So like I said, we've already got a bit of a reference there, so I'm going to go about 1 centimetre further than I need to. And just a nice clean cut. I'm going to open out that end a little bit, just so it's a bit more cylindrical, and that looks good. So, same again as with the caliper end, we're going to need our pick. I'm just going to open out that PTFE in the middle slightly. And I'm going to get our outer sleeve over it. It kind of helps to give that a little bit of a twist as you're getting over it. And then nice and simply with this guy, I'm going to hold the hose fairly firm. I'm going to push in with the shroud end and we're going to twist. You can feel it starting to work its way in. And like before on the caliper end, we're going to go about halfway up this conical end so that when we do up the outer sleeve, we create a nice big seal around it. You can see that splayed out nicely. A little bit more in there. And that's good. Get this end on, nice and firm, and just screw it in. Cool, that's hand tight. I'm going to do up this bit here now with both our 8mm spanners. Then we're going to remove the master cylinder and then we're going to screw into it. At this point, because this is a two-piece design, we can't just screw that in because the hose is going to go into like a lasso motion. We don't want that. So we'll get these tightened up and then get that one on. Cool, so these have a little bit of resistance when you're tightening it in, but they do definitely come to a point where you can really feel that that seal is being created from the outer sleeve around the hose onto this inner shroud. So I've kind of felt that there, and I've just given it a quarter of a turn. That's enough on there. If we keep tightening that, we're just going to ruin the hose with inside and start ripping things out, so we don't want that. And there's your end. So back with the 4mm, we're going to undo the master cylinder again. I'm just going to screw this in by hand to start with. That's caught a bit of resistance there. That's good. I'm just going to grab my 8mm again. Cool. So I've got this screwed into the master cylinder. I've hit a point of resistance with my spanner. I'm just going to give it an 1/8 of a turn to nip it up. Doesn't need to be any tighter than that. And that looks pretty neat there. So we're going to do the master cylinder back up onto the bar, remembering that the top bolt has to be done all the way up, and then the bottom bolt pulls that clamp back down towards it. Ideal. Smart. Right, that's the rear brake on. Let's move on to the front. So we're going to repeat the process again. We've got our hose here. We are just going to prepare it nicely for the outer sleeve, being careful not to push down at an angle, but just create a nice little hole through there. Then we're going to slide the outer sleeve over, give it a little bit of a twist whilst we're doing so. That's him on there. And as before with the rear, we're going to start with the caliper end. Grab your hose, we're going to push in slightly, and then we're going to twist as we push. Keeping that pressure every time we turn it, and you'll start to feel some resistance as we start moving up the thread. Now we come up to the conical bit, so we want to make a bit of a reference of where we are, and we want to get about halfway up there. So as we start moving up it, it starts to splay. Don't be worried, you're doing it right. Keep it going until it hits about halfway. So 2 or 3 more turns out of that, I reckon. 1 more for that. That looks good. And we're just going to slide the outer sleeve up and over and twist it on there till it's hand tight. Right on. So we've got our caliper hole there. Ready for the banjo to go on. We're going to put a seal one side, holding it with the finger, flip it over and then put the next seal on there. Ideal. Just kind of keep that in place with your finger and your thumb. We're then going to put the banjo bolt through. Just make sure that seal sits in there happy. and then grab your caliper. You might find that your hose is pulling you in whichever direction. Just plonk it down on the table and thread it in. Cool. Right, so just make sure that all your O-rings are kind of happy where they are. Nothing poking out, nothing getting pinched. That looks good to me. So we'll tighten him in. Now, it's a front brake, so we want it to kind of be angling towards the top of the bike. I'm going to grab our 8mm, feel a bit of resistance there, and pull it in an 1/8 of a turn. That looks good to me. Now, I'm not forgetting, we want to just tighten up our outer sleeve onto there. Keep him spinning. So there's a little bit of resistance there. So that's gotten quite tight. I'm just going to nip it up an 1/8 of a turn. I'm happy with that. So we've got probably just over a meter's worth of hose there left, which is more than enough to get us sized up onto this set of forks. So we're going to go back into our package, grab out our lovely stainless bolts and move them over to the bike. So let's get these fitted onto the forks. I've got my 5mm Allen key and my 2/6 bolts. Number 2. Just going to nip them up loosely so I know the caliper's in the right place. Much the same. Make sure your hose is on the inside of the fork. You do not want it outside here. 1, it looks rubbish. And 2, if you get that caught on anything, you're just going to rip your hose straight out. It's always on the inside. Dangle that over here. My little hose retainer for my forks. Lovely rusty bolt. You want to make sure all this is in the right place so that you don't get any nasty surprises when you've sized up your hose and you've ended up pulling it in a different direction and you needed actually probably an extra inch. And then I'm just going to grab the master cylinder. Just bear in mind which one was the top clamp. And I've got for reference that on my rear brake, I had it on the inside here. So I'm going to do the same. Make it a bit easier. With the hose, I mean the front's a little bit different because the only thing that's dictating whether it's going to be long enough is how long your bouncers are. You don't want it kind of really tight there so that when it compresses it's got some spring to it. I would say a little bit of spring there, but a nice kind of long line without any kinks or anything is going to be ideal. So I'm going to cut that, like I say, probably 1 centimetre longer than I need it. Chuck the Allen key on the floor whilst we're at it. Yeah. Measure thrice just to be happy. I'm good with that. I do. Oh God, it's too short. And do the same again. Just get that so it's a little bit rounder. Obviously when you're cutting through this, it's gonna put a bit of an oval to it. I'm not getting mad on this, I'm just giving it a little squidge. And like I said before when we started these, look how much hose we've got left. So if you go through this way, you're only ever gonna end up with leftovers. If you start cutting straight away and trying to guess it, it ain't gonna go well. Grab my pick, come back down through the middle again. Just make sure there's a nice hole to accommodate this. I'm going to slide over the outer sleeve, giving it a little twist. And then same again, this threaded end, just get it into position. Little push and twist. And every time you're twisting, pushing it in towards the hose. Do make sure when you put that outer sleeve on that your 8mm end is towards the caliper. It's going to be really annoying once you've threaded this in. And then you want to do it all up and you realise that you've got nothing to do it up to. We're going about halfway up this conical bit again. That's pretty good. Get the outer sleeve up and over. Start winding him in. There's a bit of resistance there already. So I'm going to grab my 8mm spanners. Slide him on there. Just wander it round. There we go. So that's kind of finger tight there. I'm just giving it a little weight for the turn. That's our master cylinder end sorted. So we're going to leave this one to dangle off a second. We're going to grab our 4mm Allen key again. We're going to remove the master cylinder. Starting with that bottom one because that one's the loosest. Onto the top one. If you're setting this aside, put the top away from you so you know that's the top. And then we're going to thread the master cylinder in there. Be really hard to cross thread these, but do just make sure when it goes in you're happy it's gone in straight. We've got this nice and flat. I'm just going to screw him in. That's got some resistance there, so I'm going to chuck an 8 for a turn on it. Dreaming. Look at that, lovely length. So top one on first. Tighten that top one up. Into the bottom one. Bish bash bosh. Front brake on there.